Call the Rolston City Government Committee meeting to order. For the record, Alderman Chandlemeyer and Alderman Arnett are present, and we've been joined by Alderman Savage. I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Discussion, Alderman Chandlemeyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for folks' record, we are amending the agenda by putting 03024 at the top and putting 0125 at the bottom.
Okay, so flipping those two items. Okay, thank you for that clarity. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Next item is approval of the minutes for the April 4th meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approval of the minutes from April 4th, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, going on to legislation. 03024, fence permit requirements related to use and development standards in the City Code Title 21. We have quite a few amendments to this. Alderman Savage, this is your legislation. Would you like to start off speaking to it?
Yes, Madam Chair. Thank you. So the origin of this legislation is, in a recent came to my attention that there was some confusion amongst the Building Board of Appeals and staff as far as how to apply this provision of the code, which reads, "Fences and walls shall not be located to unduly obstruct light and air from neighboring properties or public ways." And so what I'm attempting to do with this legislation is to provide some more clarity to what I think was the original intention of that code. And so I think, so that's the original intention. What I would, instead of going through all the amendments, what I would propose is that, excuse me, just focus on the Amendment 4, which was my attempt to combine all of my previous amendments along with some copy editing from the law office and some and trying to implement the incorporate the planning commission recommendations. That's all rolled into one. I thought it would be easier to.
Alderman, do we have we don't have Amendment 4 attached. Do you have?
Yeah. You should have.
So
we have it.
Are you withdrawing amendments 1, 2, and 3?
Yes.
Okay, so I'd like Ms. Jackson to note that in the minutes that amendments 1, 2, and 3 are being withdrawn, and he is introducing Amendment 4 in committee. Okay, so what I would like in our minutes to show that he has told us he's going to withdraw those 3. And he is introducing here for the first time Amendment 4. So if you'd like to take the time now and go through, because it looks like significant. We got red and we got blue and then we got dark blue
and green and green
and green. Yeah. I hate these colors. I just no offense on your legislation.
I understand. To explain the colors, the easy color to get out of the way is dark blue, and those are just copy edits. New headers from the law office just to help clarify and make it easier to implement and understand. So those really are not germane in the sense of new information.
Okay, for clarity, you're saying that what's in the darker blue are simply organizational amendments and adding titles, it appears.
That's correct.
Generally, additional standards, historic district, property lines and slopes, property lines, buffer areas, site visibility, light and air construction. All of those are already in the original text. Mm-hmm. However, they've become titles. So what's under each of those is already in the code, but it looks like you're deleting something. So everything in black under those blue titles are already in code.
That is correct. Ms. Reuter, can you clarify?
Okay. So what is different? I guess we start with the red.
Yeah. So the red are my original, that reflects my original legislative intent. So the original items I was going to include into the, as introduced. And so you'll see there are kind of 3 blocks of red, which represent the original 3 that I had in there. So I can certainly go through each section because they're really only 3 sections, well, 4 sections, I guess, and then the definitions at the end that were recommended.
I would appreciate that you do that.
Okay. So as we go through,
The first one's on page 2.
yeah, page 2. As we go through, just keep in mind the green. So if you go down to light and air obstruction, remember that's the clause I wanted to provide some clarity on. We split that up into 2 different subsections. One is open space, which refers to both, in this case, both forests, but also open space and the fence, which I'll explain, and then undue obstructions, just again trying to clarify that. So I guess you'd think of it as the first open space deals with light, and the second one deals with undue obstructions.
I'm not clear. What's the light?
Well, so this section just deals with light and air obstructions. So I'm saying that the first section, I, that says open space, is really referring to trying to clarify the light language.
1, fencing that is installed along area borders. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Okay. So all of that in red is new. What's in black that's underlined is existing code.
Yeah, and I think it might be a little hard to see, but the right underneath that is green, and that is coming from the Planning Commission recommendations.
I don't see green. You refer to green.
Down towards
It's
the bottom.
hard to
number
see.
2, and part of number 1 under open space.
I don't have any green on my hand.
Yeah, you do, right there.
That's not green.
Yeah, it is.
It's very dark. It's hard to see. I can mark it.
It's dollar green.
Why is mine different from yours?
It does look. So this.
Okay, and what is green?
That's
Savage Amendment?
green.
green
Green is
is-
from Planning Commission,
Planning Commission.
Planning Commission's
and
amendment.
so they didn't like my original language on open space, and so what they recommended is having is using openness as a concept, and then defining it at the end of the legislation. And the openness is basically reflective of how much open space, not forest, but open space as far as light and air that is able to come through a fence. They discussed it with some of the members on their board, said that's what they're recommending as far as how to meet this intention with fences and landscape architecture. And so what the number 1 does is, excuse me, just say that
It would have been, we probably should have gone to the Planning Commission's recommendation, but go ahead. We'll come back to it.
okay. So what this number 1 does under open space, that it says that if a fence is supposed to be installed along a forest or open space where there are no homes, that there does need to be open space. And then number 2 says that the condition may be altered with written approval from adjacent property owners. And my intention with this is to just, again, respond to an issue that came up in that a forest doesn't really need a privacy fence because it's just forest on the other side, but it can have an undue impact on the adjacent neighbors that are very close. In this case, you know, I had a large number of homes that were impacted by one fence, and so this just tries to maintain that original intention in the code of non-unduly obstructing light air.
Alderman Arnett?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have two questions on this specifically. I don't know where else, and I'm glad Director Kubiak is here, and maybe I'm directing this question to him, where we allow the property owners to approve something that is really the province of the planning department and the planning commission to approve. But I would also point out that forested property still has a property owner. So it's not like it's ownerless. And so if it's next to a forest, does that mean you have to find the property owner with the forested? But I think the bigger question is, and this would be a question for the Office of Law also, can we really have a situation where adjacent owners are approving or not approving?
Mr. Kubiak?
Yeah, thank you. I just saw that provision as well. So I'm not familiar with other parts of the code that require approval from an adjacent property owner. May be in there. I just don't know. Generally, in constructing zoning ordinance, we don't want to make a right contingent on the approval of someone else because they can apply their discretion in a way that's not consistent with the public interest. So I think this is probably a topic we should work on.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Alderman Savage?
Yeah, the only one I could think off the top of my head is the chicken legislation.
And we required with the chicken legislation that they have a coop, that it be 6 feet away from the property line, and that the community approve it. But the difference is that chickens impact not just the person next door to them. They impact the whole community. And so, yes, we had put those restrictions in the code specifically. And that was my interest, having grown up in Eastport where we did have chickens. So, yes, that is, and I would not suggest that that would be a model for us unless the circumstances are similar. And I don't think these are.
Yeah, I mean, if the plan director has another, I mean, I'd be fine with just having. I'm trying to think of a different way to word it because my point is that in this kind of situation, when the fence is not an absolute necessity for the forest, even if there's a home, and I think what I wrote in is 50 feet away, it's not that impactful to that property, but it is very impactful to potentially the property owners on the other side. And so if staff's not so sure, or the committee's not so sure putting it in the requirement for adjacent property owner approval, then would an alternative be something like putting staff, I don't know, somehow wording it in a sense that this is the preferred approach, or giving staff the ability to use their judgment?
Sometimes the way we handle these things is to require that evidence be shown that the adjoining property owners have been notified of the proposal in a very specific way, so that they've seen the application, so that they can exercise their right to offer comments and make the potential impact known to the plan reviewer. That's what immediately comes to mind in terms of response.
But the problem with that is fencing that is installed along areas bordered on one side by forest or open space, where there are no homes located within 50 feet of the space on the applicant's side. So we're not talking about an adjoining, but we are talking about whoever owns the open space or the forested area, but it's not the community. So it says must consist with the 50% openness as defined. Now, the reason for this is we want animals to be able to pass back and forth and things like that. But it doesn't seem like this specific instance actually has an adjacent property owner or owners. I mean, they're 50 feet away, unless their yard is very big and abuts up to this fence. But I think I have some real concerns about allowing us to get into a situation where residents get into the approval process. I'd much rather code that is definitive that the planning staff is making the decision, or the planning commission.
This may, part of this confusion may be the construction of that statement. I mean, without addressing the broader issue, but on the applicant's side, I think the situation here is where the open space is on or the applicant in this case is the applicant placing the sign up, fence, and the open space is on that person's side, and the houses are up close to that fence.
May I offer?
Go ahead, Alderman.
I mean, one thing that I think would work for me, I don't know, staff, would be to just swap out adjacent property owners and put the director or the department or something along those lines. It's still, because that way it still states a preference, but it allows it to be adjusted by staff.
I like that a lot better.
So are you suggesting that it would be, instead of altering with written approval from adjacent property, with notification or something to that effect?
I'd say striking written approval from the adjacent property owners and just say this condition may be altered only with approval from the director,
Right.
or department, however it's
So
preferred.
in other parts of Title 21, the director has a 10% administrative leeway. This may or may not be more than 10%, and there are some places where that power of the director is proscribed. But what that does is, by having the director do it, if somebody in the neighborhood has a problem, this would say to them, go to the director of planning and zoning and state that you have some concern, but leaves the power with the director.
Mr. Kubiak?
Yeah, I generally like the direction you're headed, but more to the substance of the thing. Alderman Arnett, you said that it seems like the purpose is to allow wildlife to pass through. But I don't think that's the purpose if you follow the way the ordinance is constructed, because this is under the heading light and air, and we're
Very
applying the regulations about obstructions to light and air. I think that's a valid purpose, though, to allow wildlife, in which case I think a separate, subsection is appropriate. But if we're just dealing with light and air only, I'm afraid that this whole amendment is complicated and difficult. One thing is that it somehow says that fences along forests or in open spaces are somehow especially obstructive to light and air. I don't know that's the case. The second thing is that we don't know what open space is. Is open space just a side yard between the house and the person's fence? And if that's the case, we would be saying that in a situation where you have a nice ample side yard, you have a higher burden in terms of fence design than elsewhere in the city, and that's fine. I just want to make it clear that if that's your intent, because there may be simply a nice side yard or a driveway, and all of a sudden that person has to go through a higher level of review and adopt a certain fence type, which is essentially an open fence, perhaps a split rail fence or something like that. But that person may have a dog to contain or children to contain, and they can't take advantage of the same benefits of fence regulations that everybody else. When the light and air may not even be the issue, because there's nothing inherent about having a forest or an open space behind a fence that contributes to light and air issues. The light and air happens when there's a fence that is close to a house or property or garden or swimming pool or something like that. So it's really concerning about what's happening on the other side of the fence. And I don't have the answer now, but I just want to share with you the practical complications that we would encounter in administering this and explaining it to people. I can pause there.
For me, this is borderline taking away a property owner's right. The light and air, I'm not sure, as Mr. Kubiak just referenced, how do we manage? How do we control that in the code?
Well,
I have 5 acres and I want to put up a line of trees that are shade-bearing trees. A perfect example. My dad, 5.5 acres or 7 acres, whatever he has, he lined his property with weeping willows. And they're 60 years old now, and they're getting to the end of their life. But they created a barrier. Shade primarily, but they created a barrier for his property line. And we're of the belief, though, good fences make good neighbors. Don't get me wrong. But would that be a sight and air obstruction?
No, that wouldn't be regulated because it's not a fence. It's not a structure. I will say, it's just an aside, we've encountered issues where people have placed evergreen shrubs in close proximity to each other so it grows and provides a permanent buffer. And that there's been an interpretation years ago that is, in fact, subject to regulation as a fence or a wall in the Eastport area. And I don't know the details of that, but so you can see how the creep of regulation is begin to apply to natural vegetation. But it essentially has the same effect as a structure, permanent structure. In answer to your question, though, it seems like the direct focus on or on light and air it's like narrowed and becomes focused in the second part under undue obstructions, where the language starts to speak to the types of things that are obstructed, like light to a window. In other words, there's a general standard. You can't unduly obstruct light and air with the fence you're proposing. And then Alderman Savage is saying, and we'd like everybody to know that if it's within 10 feet, your fence is within 10 feet of a window, that's a real concern. And that's perfect, direction for regulation because it narrows it down and says, generally, but specific, as soon as you get to that level, then you've got a real issue. And here are the approaches to resolve that. But I am a little concerned, unless the first part, rather than addressing light and air, is addressing the flow of wildlife, like you said, or scenic vistas, or important views. We can deal with that. The protection of views is an important thing, and I've seen zoning codes where fences cannot unduly obstruct scenic views. I know it seems general, but you know it when you see it, and when you get out on the site, most reasonable people will say, yeah, that fence at 6 foot solid will obstruct our view across this, this valley or this property that is scenic. So you can't use a fence to do that. Not ideal, but that is a popular approach.
And of course, we had that perfect example on Chester Avenue in Eastport.
Well, and we have another example in Eastport that's in appeal right now.
Or resolved, actually, but that was
Did
a
it?
commercial residential
Right.
conflict.
Alderman?
Yeah, just to reiterate and give maybe a finer point on it. The issue I was asked to try to prevent from happening again by providing more clarity is where a large number of homes on the other side of the number of homes was a community open space, community forest. And it used to just be a split rail in between communities. And split rail allows plenty of air. It's just the ones you see along next to farms, split rail. Plenty of light and air, wildlife too. And so next thing my constituents knew is that basically a big privacy fence was removed and replaced with a privacy fence. And these lots are small, and so that privacy fence, besides the wildlife, but that's not in the code currently, it really impacted, especially in what I'm trying to address when it's on top of a hill. It's even more of a blockage to the light and the air. And so when I was reading through the code, I was like, well, it seems like that was the part of the intention of the original language about not unduly obstructing light and air. And so that was the confusion point again with some of the boards. And so I was trying to provide that clarity. And when I say open space, I should probably just use light and airspace instead of open space. But it's the light and airspace, which is what the Planning Commission was recommending to focus on for the language.
Alderman Arnett?
So I do have concerns with number 2 under small I, but I have very strong concerns of number 3, where it talks about over 4 feet tall. When you combine that with, on the last page in green, the definition of open fence, I think combining those two, most of the fences in my ward would have to come down. They would be illegal. All of the side yard and rear yard fences are allowed to be 6 feet. Mine has planks on both sides, so there's a gap, but not a 2-inch gap. So it wouldn't be like a 6-inch board, 6-inch open space, 6-inch board. So my own fence, I don't think, if I'm understanding this correctly, would meet the standards. People who have palisade fences, which there are some in the ward, along the backyard in my ward in the R2NC zone, you can't have a fence over 4 feet in any of the front yards, but you can have it over 6 feet in the side, behind the front line and along the rear yard. And I don't know of a fence that would meet this definition of open fence on the last page.
What's a biological community? That was the first thing.
That
Did we make up things as we?
that comes from the Forest Conservation Act. We already have in our code.
That's in our code, definition of
from
a
the-
biological
It comes from the
community.
Maryland Forest Conservation Act. But to Alderman's point about the fence, I mean, yours, this would not apply to most of this would not apply to yours because you don't have a 50 feet of forest next to your house. The only part that would potentially apply, and my intention is only to have it apply to new fences, but it does put a limit on 6 feet because currently we don't have a maximum height on fences in the city, and
Yeah, we do.
No, we don't. That's why I put this in here. There's no, in certain neighborhoods, most neighborhoods, I believe there's no height limit. And so that's what I was trying to put in here once I find out to say, because I think if you know the stricken part, and I know we're getting ahead of ourselves, but it's only restricted in the R2NC, R3NC, R3NC2. But all the other districts, you're allowed to have a fence over 6 feet. And I can't really think of a good scenario where that would really be something we would want to see, or really high fences all around town.
Well, I think there's a real nomenclature problem here because this whole section says fences and walls. Where do we get down to it's only fences and walls adjoining open space? Is that under 5A
Yeah, it's,
small I?
yeah, it's only that section where I talk about forest and light and airspace and the fence. Because this section of code is referenced by our other fence code in chapter 17.
So I think the Title 5 needs to be changed to make that very clear that this section and only this section applies to fences that are adjoining forest or open space.
Okay.
I'm looking at, on page 1,
Well, the-
A under generally, and we strike through the section of the code, then to restate the section of the code and define it as fence and wall permit requirement. Am I reading that correctly?
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
On page 1, under A, generally, fences and walls as defined by this title must be erected, placed, maintained, altered, or replaced pursuant to a permit issued in accordance with, and then the code section is
That's why
deleted.
I asked first to get this. This is Title 17.
Okay,
So it's
so is that, I don't understand why we strike through and then we put it back in. Is there an issue with it?
No,
Oh.
I think the Office of Law was just removing the spelled out section to put the section symbol, and then they took out an Apple City code since it's already inherent, and just included the title of that section of code, which is fence and wall permit requirements. Ms. Brewer can correct me if I'm wrong on that. So look on page 1. And Ms. Reuter? Cynthia? I said, so I think that was the intention. If you look on page 1, towards the end of the page, the chair is asking why you strike section 1734.10. And I think that was just to
Cynthia Reuter, legislative analyst with the Office of Law. That strikeout is strictly an Office of Law preference on how we reference section numbers. It's taking out the words and replacing it with this section symbol.
Seems like unnecessary confusion to me. Because it's still referring back to the same section of the.
That's
Um,
correct.
Any other questions about, before I ask Mr. Kubiak to talk to us about the Planning Commission's recommendation?
I do have one, Madam Chair. So if you're going through this, you have the fences and walls generally, then you have additional standards, historic district, which basically says HPC governs that, but then is the historic district covered by or exempted from 9, the standard maximum height? Because if we're making the maximum height throughout the city, that would mean, I hope, but I'm not sure, that it would obtain to the historic district as well.
this is all new.
So
replace
the
the
entire city would now have a maximum height of 6 feet, and then there's some subsetting of that, which is in the NC districts and the maritime district. So the question is, does the standard 9 apply in B1? Or does the historic district have its own unspecified fence height requirement?
Maybe the historic district is what's misplaced, because all the rest of that is about options uh, for the fence. You know, property lines, visibility, you know, the design. And unless, like you said, all of that is applicable to historic district, in which case that should probably be B
Well, or as you're pointing out, I think
or C.
Historic District 1 should come under and become just like the NC districts. So there should be A, then new B would be historic districts, C would become the current B, and D would become the maritime. That's a construction question for the Office of Law, but I'm asking the sponsor, is it your intent that no fence in the historic district be taller than 6 feet? In which case I would recommend that be moved under number 9 here as a new B section, followed by.
I mean, my intention was for any new fence. So, including the historic district. But if it overcomplicates things, I'm just trying to. I'm not trying to take away somebody's property rights, but I am trying to strike a good balance between for property owners on both sides of the fence, so to speak. And it just seemed odd to me that, and maybe I could just restrict this to residential. It just seemed odd to me to have fences over that height in residential communities. It's already prohibited in the NC district. So if the committee thinks that should be narrowed down or removed, I'm certainly look at that.
Alderman Schnellmeyer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Kubiak, would this legislation, if it were to pass as written, would it apply for renovation of currently existing fences? Or would it only apply to the installation of brand new things? So let's say in my neighborhood, I have an existing fence, but it's rotting. I got to tear it down and rebuild something. Would these new regulations be applied to it?
Yes, they would be.
Okay.
By virtue of the subtitle A under section 2160.070. It applies to maintaining, altering, replacing
Okay.
fences.
So I appreciate wanting to try and meet the needs on both sides. We do have a tendency to put a lot of onerous burdens on folks trying to do what they can on their property. I do understand, in your community's sake, they did have a pretty drastic situation happen. I don't know all the details, but from what I've heard, it does sound pretty upsetting. It does sound pretty drastic, but respectfully, I think what this is does cast a little bit too wide of a net. I don't know if there's a way to narrow it down or what as it's currently written, but I'm a little uncomfortable without this. But I don't know how exactly we can fix what happened in your case while still maintaining the rights of other folks. And maybe it's one of the situations where we can't thread that needle, but I just don't know a good answer off the top of my head. I'm sorry. I know that's not a productive thing, but I'm trying. I can't figure something out.
Yeah. Yeah. And if and I understand, and I think I mean, I do hear you, and it is helpful to hear that it might still be a bit too complicated. I mean, I can certainly, for example, remove the maximum height limit because that does seem to have caused some consternation. And as far as the property right issue, it is a tough balance. But again, in this case, again, I'm trying to respond to by having language dealing with forest is that there are no homes on this forest. As far as where the applicant, it was a community association. They have no homes on that section of forest, and so there was no demonstrable need for that on their end. But it was a very large impact to those who actually do have homes nearby. That's kind of the balance I was trying to find, and sounds like I'm not quite there yet. But
Mr. Savage, I don't know what incident is being referred to. Where is it?
it's in between two communities at the end of Georgetown Road,
Mariners Landing, Mariners Point.
around there.
Well, let me ask, is this, we haven't even gotten to the Planning Commission's recommendation yet. Is this something that can be repaired, having heard the concern? You've already withdrawn, or you plan to withdraw 3 amendments for a 4th, and that sounds like it's got issues. So, as a sponsor, you want to move forward? You only have 11 minutes, Mr. Jakubiec. Actually, 6. He needs 5 minutes to get back to his office.
Well, yeah. So if that's the case, I would be happy to rework the amendment 4. I think it's, and so I can certainly take out some of the things regarding the height. I do want to actually give Mr. Kubiak's comments some more thought about wildlife. Might be something good to work, and Alderman Arnett's comments about that might be good to work in. I guess to that point, if there's anything, if Madam Chair, if the director has any other comments on the legislation or the Planning Commission recommendations that I could take back, same thing with the committee, then I could take that back and see if there's something I can work up.
Well, I think that it may warrant a meeting with you and Mr. Kubiak to work out.
We have
the
to schedule
different-
one anyway, I believe.
And
You
I
know.
would suggest HBC also, or take
I
the
might take that
historic
out.
district out.
Yeah,
I don't
Um,
want to overcomplicate. It's already complicated enough.
Right.
but you can't ignore it.
So, yeah, I would
I mean,
think
you
taking
referenced them.
HBC out because they have their own rules. I do think that on page 2, this number 2 in green, I think may also could go away. The planning director already has the right to amend applications unless you think there's going to be amendment greater than 10%, in which case I think there might be a bigger problem. And then I do have a real problem with the definition of open fence. And I know that most of the fences in my ward, first of all, this isn't really quite explicit, but most of the fences in my ward, even above 4 feet, would not qualify to be replaced with this definition of open fence unless that open fence is made very explicit that it is fencing along open space or forest space. 'Cause I don't think any of my fences qualify, including my own, with this definition from the Planning Commission. Or meant to be responsive to the Planning Commission. Otherwise, I think you have been largely responsive to the Planning Commission report.
Alderman Savage, would you like to take this back and reword it or work
Yes,
it?
Madam Chair, I'll be the director and
Okay. and consider or reconsider the subtitles.
Yeah.
Because I don't
Yeah.
think they're beneficial the way that they've been organized.
And I'd be happy to be a co-sponsor and work with you on this.
Thank you.
Okay,
As
so
long as you can keep your fence.
he has a vested interest, truly.
Well, my
Um,
whole community does in reality.
Well,
I
and it's
think-
not
I
just
think
Ward
yours.
8.
Oh, I know. I think yours do too.
Yeah.
I'm being very parochial and speaking about my ward and how this would be received. But I think
And
citywide.
I have a few properties with forests in my ward, very close to my community, as a matter of fact. Anyway, so I will entertain a motion to postpone action on this and allow Mr. Alderman Savage an opportunity.
so moved.
Second?
Okay, further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Right.
Okay, so let's take us back to 0125, expansion of childcare options in Annapolis. Alderman Chenelmeyer. Thank you, Mr. Jakubiec, and you have 7 minutes now to get back to your
Okay, thank you. I can spend 3 more minutes with you if you want me to talk on this particular matter for 3 minutes.
Do you have any
Yeah.
commentary on 0125 before I go into my part on it?
Yeah, I would only say that I had a chance to talk with Alderman Shannonmeyer about this, particularly one aspect regarding the resource conservation area, the critical area, and I think that's fixed and resolved. And this is an important piece of legislation because it ensures that the city code is compliant with the state definitions and code, and it generally allows for daycare facilities. And I'm in agreement with each of the amendments that were proposed.
Thank you,
So
sir.
good job to everybody on this one.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So yeah, 0125, I see it as having 3 moving pieces to it. One is it puts our childcare regulations in line with updates in the state childcare regulation code. The second piece is that it allows something called family child care large in the city, which is child care that out of a person's home that is 9 to 12 children. Currently, we only allow child care small, which is 8 children or less in the city. And then finally, we have a genuinely unique in the state of Maryland regulation where we only allow one non-residential employee to work in a family child care center, i.e. a child care center out of someone's home. And this removes that regulation. So that is the legislation as written. Amendment 1 was a good catch by Alderman Savage, and that gets into the critical area portion. The legislation as written would have allowed childcare centers, i.e. big, large public childcare things in the critical area. That was not my intention. That was just an oversight, and that strikes that. So that was a good catch by Alderman Savage, and fully on board, and that was what Director Kubiak was mentioning. So I will move a favorable I will ask for a favorable recommendation on Amendment 1.
Okay. Is there a change in the title? You mentioned family child care homes facilities as a title that we didn't have prior to.
So what the city currently allows, we allow group childcare. Sorry, Madam Chair. We allow, I believe that the current definitions that the city has is childcare group, which is what we picture as a large public childcare center, and that is 9 or more children. And then the city allows what is called childcare small. Childcare small is, in very oversimplified terms, a daycare facility out of your personal home that is 8 children or less. Regulations that have been updated in the state have allowed a larger version of family childcare that allows 9 to 12 children. City regulations have not caught up with that. So we do not allow family childcare large. So while the state allows for family childcare large, i.e., personal a childcare center or a childcare out of your home from not with 9 to 12 children, the city code does not allow that. So this legislation updates our regulations to match that with the state.
Okay. I'm looking for where I saw the strike through on page. Okay, I was looking at the family child care homes on page 3. That's what I was referring to. And that's what Alderman Schnellmeyer just referenced. Family child care homes and large family child care. I didn't want us to lose the title because later on it's referenced, but it's not capitalized as a specific title. Thank you.
Correct. It's wasn't meant to be a title of the legislation, but unless I'm misunderstanding what you mean by title, which is also very possible.
Okay. This is the Schnellmeyer amendment that we're just getting.
Yes,
Number
we can
3.
get to number 3
Okay.
after 1 and 2, and I'll happy to explain all.
Okay. Well,
We are
we are
not-
on 1 right now. And there is a motion to give a favorable recommendation. So number 3 under B on Amendment 1 is not intended to be a specific title. No family child care home.
Correct. That was just an error in drafting, quick small oversight. It interfered with state critical area laws.
Okay. All right. Without further discussion, all in favor of giving a favorable recommendation to Savage Amendment 1, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. I'm sorry. It's a nay. 1 nay.
Ross coming out hard against critical area.
Okay, so Amendment 2, Savage Amendment. Alderman Savage, would you like to speak to your amendment?
Okay, so number 2, yeah, this is the critical area one.
Oh, shoot. I got my amendments mixed up.
Yeah, this one
Sorry, I
speaks
should
to
have
critical
raised
areas.
my hand earlier. The other one was just removing the parking requirement for
Oh,
childcare
Aye.
centers.
I'm so sorry. We need to reopen debate on Amendment 1 then, because I got my amendments mixed up. I'd like to reopen Amendment 1. I apologize because I feel
Well,
like that's
then
going
we
to be
should
more.
reconsider Amendment 1.
I'm going to reconsider Amendment 1.
Okay.
I'm
all
still in favor.
favor. Please say aye.
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 I'm still in
Okay,
favor of it.
So
but,
let's go back to Amendment 1. I am too, but I'm reading the amendment. I'm not
Okay.
hearing, I guess.
May I give background on this one?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
sorry.
I think everything he said about the first one applies to the second one.
Right.
But I sorry, I should have spoke up earlier. This one removes the parking requirements for these family childcare homes. Let's see. Yeah, because I think the intention is to keep these on the smaller side anyway. And one of the things I observed, and well, this isn't a childcare home, I believe, but the one in Alderman Schnellmeyer's ward, the new one, it just seems, I think the parking requirements are not well tailored to this time of use because, again, most of the time it's just a handful of teachers or I don't know what you call them, the adults who are running it, and like the kids don't need parking, right? The biggest parking use is during pickup and drop off, and so, but every time I drive through that lot, I cringe because it's just empty asphalt, which could have been playground for the kids and or trees, and so anyway, that's kind of what I was trying to do with this. Is that accurate, Alderman?
I'm very in agreement on this. The Primrose site, a large part of that is parking lot that is very underutilized, but a lot of the parking requirements made it much of a more impactful development than it needed to be. on the other side is we know that parking requirements do have a stifling impact on development of things that we need, and there is a very critical childcare shortage. And so anything that can put a stifling impact on desperately needed childcare facilities is bad in my book. So I fully agree. The most of the time that we have childcare facilities, the most of the traffic is pick up and drop off. It's not long-term parking. So I am in favor of Amendment 1.
May I ask a question? Oh, okay. What is deleted, just clarification, number 1 under zoning requirement, is no off-street parking for family childcare homes shall be located in a required front yard. I know the problem with parking in front yards. If there is a paved area in the front yard, is it usable? And this is cut out. It's not included at all in the new language. So is that not important, or you don't care?
I'm not
or-
sure I follow.
I shouldn't say it like that, but
I'm not sure I follow. Which one are you referring to?
under B, zoning requirements, number 1, there's a complete strike through. And 2, well, but 1 is a complete strike through, and there is no mention of it in number 3, which is the new language. 2 is partially mentioned, I believe. No, that's completely. I was thinking that non-resident employees. So 1 and 2 are deleted for the new 3. And if that's good for you, I just want to be clear that that's your intent.
Yeah, that if they still want to have parking spaces off street, they're still allowed to have them. But number 1, I see your point. Number 1 appears like it would prevent them from being located in required front yards. But I guess going back, I believe did the Education Commission chime in on this? I can't remember. But we did have some comments about just the parking requirement also makes it more difficult to have these in communities. And these are, I believe, the sponsor, correct me if I'm wrong, but the intention is mostly to focus on these smaller facilities, not the big.
Correct. The Education Commission ended up not taking any stance on this whatsoever. They were just very supportive of the legislation overall. They didn't get into the amendments, although they did recommend one new amendment, Amendment 3, which we passed around. But something that was brought up is because a lot of the bulk of this legislation is focused on family child care homes that are in communities themselves. By requiring bigger parking requirements, you end up again stifling the ability of these things to be implemented, especially as we waive the non-residential parking requirement. I'm sorry, the non-residential employee regulation, because if you still have the parking requirements on top of that, you still have that same impact of reducing the number of staff overall that they can take on, and that hurts the staffing ratios.
All right, so I'll entertain a motion. Alderman Arnett, sorry.
So I don't mind striking number 1, because that means it stays in the code and you can't park in a front yard, if a required front yard. The number 2 does impact some wards and some areas and wards more than other wards. And if you want to do it to the everything but the R2NC, that's fine with me, but I think that the R2NC, for a number of reasons, is very heavily impacted by the lack of parking, and particularly with all of the restaurants and marinas and other things going on in the ward, non-restaurant business on 4th Street, etc. I think it'd be less of an issue in Upper Eastport where there is more off-street parking for the homes there, not exclusively, but so that's why I'm voting against, and will vote against this amendment at the council meeting. As far as then it just leaves the existing number 3 as the only thing that's under this section. So, and I say this being strongly in support of first of all, getting in conformance with state code, but secondly, even if we give people affordable housing, if we don't give them childcare and good transportation and good community retail services, not sure we're doing them a full favor. So wholeheartedly in support of this piece of legislation, but there are other considerations, and having the employees parking in the neighborhood is one of those considerations.
Alderman Savage?
Just to respond, and I guess give you some other things to contemplate would be, one, we do have a shortage of daycare. I think that was main intention of sponsors to try to increase that, and I think you'd probably admit that on a community level. As far as parking loads, also keep in mind, one, that there are a very minimal number of employees, and two, it's during the day, which is when most people are going to be out at work. You're not talking about in the evening when the biggest parking loads are a problem, right? So I think that's again why we often approve senior centers and senior related facilities, because the parking impacts are at different times of day.
So as soon as we have trolleys in Lower Eastport, I'll be quite in favor of this.
Okay, so I will entertain a motion on Amendment 1.
So moved.
Second that. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay.
And Madam Chair, I do want to apologize to the committee for getting my amendments swapped in my excitement and zeal.
We understand. Do we want to go to the Savage Amendment 2, which we've already discussed, but
Savage Amendment 2 is actually the critical area one that I went over very excitedly. There was a goof on the part of us drafting it, allowing larger childcare facilities in the critical area. I will make a favorable recommendation if that is all right with the committee, unless they have further questions for me.
So moved.
Second.
okay. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the Savage Amendment 2, please say aye.
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 Aye. Okay. And that takes us to the Schandelmeyer Amendment 3.
Yes. So Amendment 3 came at the recommendation of the Education Commission. Currently, our child care centers have a additional regulation on top of what the state requires, having a specific amount of outdoor space. This does interfere with where child care centers can be placed. They recommended waiving that. State requirements do have their own standards put in place, so you can't just shove these in a random concrete box. But what also state requirements have is if you're within a certain amount of like a park or another type of outdoor public facility, they give you that flexibility versus the city codes and requirements do not. So
Alderman, let me ask, you didn't mean that we were eliminating the requirement. We're just more closely conforming with what the Maryland Annotated Code and TOMA have outlined.
by removing the city's requirements, we would be following the state's requirements.
Mhm.
The state has its own standards of outdoor space. I believe Ms. Buckland has.
Yeah, there's just one correction that I missed in an earlier one. It looks like they potentially missed as well, since this is the child care center, not the family homes one. So this is like larger centers. That's actually COMAR 13A.16. 15 is the family child care homes part, and the 16 is the child care centers part.
Okay.
And that does have some requirements around outdoor play areas. And you are correct. This would mean that child care centers within the city would have to follow. They obviously have to follow COMAR, but the city would not impose additionally restrictive rules on them.
And did you mean 13A.15?
I believe 13A.16
16.
is the child care centers portion of COMAR. The 13A.15 is the family child care homes portion.
Okay, so we should amend that in our notes and in the amendment. Alderman Arnett?
So I'm trying to figure out how this will read. We'll make that correction to the Comar citation in A and Roman numeral B generally, but it does seem like the only thing that Roman numeral B speaks to is drop off and pickup. So it almost should be zoning requirements dash drop off and pickup.
Since all of the general information.
That is a question for the law office and a bit above my pay grade. I apologize.
Ms.
I'm
Bruder,
just-
could you, or Ms. Smith, and welcome Ms. Smith. She's our newest city attorney.
So, yeah, you're left with just that one paragraph, and that would be covered under renumber accordingly. That
Okay.
generally means straighten it out so it fits.
So I move favorably the Shondelmeyer amendment.
Second?
Further discussion, does that mean we're going to change the numbering of it, or we're gonna, so we won't have zoning requirements?
You can certainly do it that way.
What were you proposing? Something different?
No, I hadn't. I just put this amendment together, so I hadn't had time to think that one through yet.
This amendment got lost in the shuffle of a lot of other pieces of legislation when I had submitted it. So
It's not complicated. I don't think it needs to be.
It's not a,
If we just changed it to drop off pickup,
Yeah.
and then the next one would be zoning requirements.
no, I think,
Alderman Stoudemire? Alderman Savage, sorry.
Well, I mean, this is just a general question. I don't want to delay this at all, but I'm a bit concerned. I mean, because the amendment summary alone makes it sound like we're removing. It says we're removing a requirement that childcare centers have outdoor play areas, but we're not, right? What we're saying is that we're removing our own individual requirements, but they still have to comply with the state requirements. So I think that summary looks a little. People can misinterpret that to make it look like we're removing, because I think everybody agrees kids need outdoor play space, right? And but I do want to request, again, I'm not saying this to hold this up, but at some point, if the law office, excuse me, could look at the code, the state code, and compare just to make sure we're not removing language that would be, better than the states or whatever, just so we can kind of know what we're getting replaced with.
So you're recommending that the summary of the amendment be changed
Yeah.
to more appropriately fit what? That would speak to standards of child care centers. One being using standards set down by the state. 2 being
Drop off.
drop off and pick up.
And 3 being educational and religious affiliated. So
Right,
the zoning requirements is not very meaningful here.
right. And then 3 under C is really a repeat of drop off.
I'm fine with that changing of the amendment summary, because again, we do want to stress that we're just matching the state's requirements.
Mhm.
We're not removing we're not removing things entirely. We're just again getting in what the state does, not adding our own additional restrictions.
So are you suggesting that under child care centers, your language is different to reflect the fact that we were just mirroring state standards, even though it tells us Maryland Code and so on?
I'm just saying, changing up on the amendment summary. I think that's what Alderman Savage was mentioning, not actually getting into the meat of the amendment itself, but instead of it saying instead of a amendment summary saying Amendment 3 removes the requirement that child care centers have outdoor play areas, it says Amendment 3 matches state requirements for outdoor play areas.
Which, for the record, if I may, it looks like the state requirements are actually stricter than what we have written as far as requiring more open space, recreational space.
Okay, so does that mean we're eliminating C, zoning requirements, educational and religious affiliated child care centers?
Mm.
Is there language in Comar that speaks to particularly religious affiliated child care? Is that something that's needed? That's here.
So, Madam Chair, if I may, since this amendment got lost in the shuffle a little bit, and I think it still needs a little bit of phrasing and pacing and rework, but we're all in a general sense of agreement of what we want to do with just matching the state with the regulations on this front. We had a first and a second, so I guess the procedure is do we have to make a vote now that's been first or seconded as a point of procedure? Okay.
A point of order,
Would
right?
you-
I think you could withdraw. Whoever made the motion could just withdraw it.
Okay, so I will withdraw my make a motion to withdraw my motion, and then we can let Amendment 3 get doctored and reworked, and then when it's ready, if we choose to move this legislation forward to the main council, knowing that this will be reworked for the council as a whole, wonderful. If we want to wait for this to be finished for the committee, I understand, but I would ask for us to vote the legislation out because I do think we have a general understanding of where it's going and would like to see it move forward. But that's up to the whole. So if you'll allow me, I would like to withdraw my motion for a favorable recommendation on Amendment 3.
Hey, we don't need a vote on it, do we? His ability to withdraw his own motion. I think, Alderman, it's up to you whether you want to bring it back to us, but I think you have a consensus of this body in support of what you want.
I think this is going to be one of the rare zoning text changes that doesn't get a lot of pushback. So I am quite content on bringing this out of our committee into the council as a whole. So I would like to make a favorable recommendation if my colleagues will allow it. So-
Okay, so you want to postpone it to bring it back to us?
No, I want
Or
to
you
get
want
it
to
out.
take it to the full council
Let's
with your new
move-
amendment?
Let's
Yeah,
get
move
it
it.
out of here. Let's give a favorable recommendation. So
And I'd like to be added as a co
thank you, sir. So can I make a favorable recommendation for the legislation, Madam Chair?
It's been moved in second. Further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
And you may add me as a sponsor also, please. Okay. Well, that appears to have exhausted our agenda. Anything else for the good of the order? Hearing nothing, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Say aye. Aye. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Buckland, for attending today.